In Genesis 19:26, we read that during the destruction of Sodom, Lot's wife looked back and was turned into a pillar of salt. Many have questioned why such a gruesome fate befell her for having committed such a small crime. However, I believe that there is one theory that can explain her demise without resorting to accusing God of giving a punishment that does not fit the crime. In fact, this theory suggests that God never even punished her at all, but that she was a victim of her own bad behavior. The explanation begins with the family still in Sodom. In verses 15 through 17 we read, "When the morning dawned, the angels urged Lot to hurry, saying, 'Arise, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, lest you be consumed in the punishment of the city.' And while he lingered, the men took hold of his hand, his wife's hand, and the hands of his 2 daughters, the Lord being merciful to him. And they brought him out and set him outside the city. So it came to pass, when they had brought them outside, that he said, 'Escape for your life, do not look behind you, nor stay anywhere in the plain. Escape to the mountains, lest you be swept away in the destruction.'" So far, what we know is that the family lingered in Sodom even after they were told to get out, lest they be swept away in the destruction also. This seems to indicate that whatever type of destruction was going to befall the city, it was not a targeted smiting. Anyone within the blast radius was going to be destroyed, whether they were wicked or righteous. Thus, the warning to escape is one of utility. Additionally, we read in Genesis 19:22, God states to Lot, "Hurry, escape there, for I cannot do anything until you arrive there." Therefore, there seems to be a geographical safe zone and a geographical danger zone. Now, Lot arrives in Zoar, and God immediately commences the destruction. And we hear about his wife in verse 26, where it states, "But his wife looked back, and she became a pillar of salt." But that is not actually what the Hebrew text says. The word used for "she looked back" is actually watabet, which is a fill stem of the Hebrew word navat. And in Hebrew, this means that the verb is taking on a causative action. This conjunction of the root word navat is rarely used in the Hebrew Bible, but when it is usually referring to a desire or a lust, conveying a sense of reflexiveness. Something internally caused the person to look. A literal rendering would be, she caused herself to look from behind him being Lot. Here, it seems like it was her own desires at work. But this is only half the problem. The second half of the problem is that whatever she was doing it from behind her husband. The Hebrew text states that she looked desirably, me'akara, from behind him, meaning she was located somewhere behind Lot, suggesting that she remained physically behind her husband and her family, not fully committed to leaving. In other words, she remained in the blast radius because she did not heed the command to escape lest you be swept away. This is further evidenced by the fact that the phrase "from behind him" only occurs 12 times in the Old Testament. It almost always conveys the meaning of somebody trailing behind somebody else or somebody chasing them at a distance. This would seem to fit because a more common usage of the phrase exists within the Hebrew Bible many times. Akara, which simply translates to behind him or after him. In most cases, this denotes a close proximity of the 2 objects. However, when you add the prepositional mem to the beginning of the phrase, it makes it from behind him and conveys a sense of distance. And I believe this is exactly what happened to Lot's wife. Being that she was likely a native of Sodom herself, she probably did not want to leave the city, and perhaps, like her sons-in-law, did not even believe that the city was going to be overthrown until it was. She was probably the reason that her family lingered there to begin with, and why the angels had to take them by the hand and lead them outside the city in haste. It would appear that she lingered a great deal behind her husband, and was a victim of not heeding the angels' warning to get out of the blast radius, lest they be swept away. This was not a case of God smiting somebody in punishment for wickedness, but a case of somebody not heeding a very real warning. The last part of this equation is answering why she turned into salt. And I believe the answer to that is because the entire region was covered in salt already. In fact, that's why people float in the Dead Sea, is because of the salt content. If in fact the city was struck by a meteor, as archaeologists believe, then the salt and the sulfur, as well as anything else in the vicinity, would have been superheated and then strewn about the entire blast radius. An entire cloud of superheated salt, sulfur, and ash would have been distributed throughout the area. If indeed Lot's wife lingered enough that she was in the blast radius, she most likely would have been covered in some form of superheated or even liquefied mineral, including salt.